live momentarily with Mayor Levy Weinstein and our guest, Rabbi Ben Packer. So just hang in there and don't go away while we're getting set up. Thanks.
I don't know details. I didn't see it.
Hey, Mayor, let me know when you guys are on because I muted the microphones.
You can put on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know on YouTube version. Yeah.
I think that Ramadan is always a difficulty, and the month before Ramadan is also a difficulty. But after Ramadan, that's when stuff really happens. And the last Ramadans have always, there's always an excuse, it's like near the boots, Ramadan boots around the counter. So sometimes before this holiday or that holiday, or this excuse or that excuse, but this year, as Ramadan earlier, so there's like a whole summer. But there's nothing really there's not a lot of excuses. And the government, for the last 2 years, didn't have a government. Like it was always, not a real government, a caretaker government, this kind of government. Now we have a real government, and they have a real agenda. And so, after Ramadan, there's a lot of stuff that was delayed because of Ramadan. And you're going to start to see a lot of what was the nations of Arabs, all kinds of destruction in Jerusalem, house demolitions, really? All kinds of different programs were but no one's going to start anything during Ramadan. It's just not going to happen. But after Ramadan, that excuse just goes away. And because it's almost like a Pesach this year, that goes away also. So there's no Pesach as well. There's never Ramadan. It's just good. So you're going to see a lot. A lot. Well, I don't want to give away what I say. I don't know what you're saying. Well, they're going to have a lot of Arabs like to use excuses for this war. That's how they generally do wars, right? Something happens and they say, "Oh, because that doesn't work." So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that. Well, they want. So the short answer is they want a war to do. If they don't want a war, then there won't be a war. But they'll have plenty of opportunity to say, because you did this, we're going to have a war.
Well, I read an article just a couple of days ago with the Digest. I can't remember who it was written about. My God, it was really pessimistic. Around this, all this, all this.
They're scared. They're scared of that. Probably likely.
Okay, so Gary.
Yes, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so we're gonna get started, and whoever shows up, that's fine.
Well, I think there was the original start time that was started the other day.
Yeah, the original was 7:30, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't do it because there's a farbrengen happening here at 8:15. Yeah. Okay, welcome everyone to the JRCC. Good to see you. We'll see who else shows up here. This is going to be broadcast live stream through our YouTube channel, through Twitter, through Facebook, through WhatsApp groups, and hopefully we'll reach a lot of people. And whoever is watching, tuning in right now, if you could please share this with whatever platforms you're using. There's a lot going on in Israel right now. Everybody is aware of the protests going on, and the protests from the left, and the issue is, will Israel remain a Jewish state? And that seems to be the core of the issue. In this, in the parsha that we just read this past Shabbat, we're dealing with issues of, is this person impure, not pure? How do you become pure? And after a certain process, you had to, if you were impure, you would have to give a sacrifice, bring a sacrifice to the temple, our temple, which is located on the Temple Mount, which was located on the Temple Mount and will be rebuilt on the Temple Mount. So while we go through all the different laws of, you know, are you in a state of impurity, tameh, and what you have to do, there's always introspection in the Jewish community of how to better ourselves and become better Jews and in a proper state. And while we reflect, and while we acknowledge the laws of what you have to do to remedy it after, like I said, bringing a korban to Beis Hamikdash, we're looking at others. We see others who are on the Temple Mount during what they call the holy month of Ramadan. And during this, what they call the holy month of Ramadan, they have Hamas rallies there, and they hang Hamas flags and banners, and they chant, "Kill the Jews." Where's the introspection in the Islamic community to condemn this? So there's a lot of issues that we have to deal with. And while we have all these issues, Rabbi Ben Packer is very involved in restoring Jewish property in Israel. Ever since the 48 war, we have seen, and from the 67 war, when Israel liberated the territories, Jews saw horrific things. That synagogues were demolished by Arabs, cemeteries were desecrated, the kotel was made into a garbage dump. So we have Ben, who's restoring Jewish properties in Jerusalem and throughout the territories as well. So he's doing incredible holy work. And this is what we do, and this is what we have to support. So Ben is going to explain everything, the great stuff that he's involved with, and give him your attention. You could ask him questions as well as we go through. So Ben, welcome to Toronto. Welcome to the
Thank you, everyone, for coming. So I'm just going to say some brief remarks, I guess you could say, about the situation in Israel as it is, and we can have questions or whatever about anything, whatever you want to ask. So I think it's very important to differentiate, and I think this is one of the main points people are missing in the world right now. A lot of times in life, that's a very important thing, to be able to see the nuance in the situation. If you can't do that, then a lot of times you're gonna have a lot of trouble. So in this situation, we have this thing with the protests, as Mayor mentioned. We have these protests about the legislation in the Knesset about what's called judicial reform, and it's basically different proposals as to how to revamp the judicial system to be more reflective of the population, more, actually, ironically, more democratic, where the people will decide more For example, in America, the president chooses the Supreme Court justices, and it's ratified by the Senate. That's a pretty common thing around the world in terms of, or sometimes the legislature picks the Supreme Court justices, but there's always a democratic component. Whereas in Israel, the people have no say at all, and the actual judges pick themselves. The previous judges pick the new judges. So it's a bit problematic in terms it becomes very much like a club, a certain kind of club. And so it's extremely problematic. I think everyone, except for the most dogmatic, would understand that this is problematic at this point. So anyway, that's what the protests are supposedly about. We know the protests are they're really more of a, as the mayor pointed out, it's really more of a question of where's the state going in terms of the Jewish character. Is it going to be more of a Jewish state? And they use the word democratic. I think people need to realize that the word demokratia in Ivrit, in Hebrew, is not democracy in English. It really means more of an aristocracy, is what they really mean. They mean that there should be a select group of people who, kind of have the parenting role on the situation here, so the kids don't get out of control. And by kids, you mean the more religious and the Sephardic Jews, right? They're not allowed to get out of control. You have these nice white Ashkenazic people who will make sure that nobody, gets too carried away in their ideas, basically. So that's really what the fight is about. That it's not about democracy at all. It's about whether or not we should continue to have an aristocracy. Anyway, it's a very, it is in some ways simple situation, and in some ways it's very complex. There's different proposals. They have different elements to them. The people who thought them up are incredibly intelligent people, and they thought it up in that way for a reason. And so it is complicated, and it will look differently in the end. Like all proposals do. They start a certain way, and they end the other way, and whatever. It'll be similar, but it'll be different. But I would like to suggest that to a large degree that is a domestic issue. That's not to say that people who don't live in Israel can't have opinions. Certainly anyone can have an opinion. But it's a domestic issue. It's being voted on by citizens of Israel. Now, whether or not Jews all over the world should have the ability to vote in Israel is actually a very interesting topic. It's a very interesting topic, and it's been discussed. And even, by the way, I don't know what the rules in Canada are, but in America, if you don't live in America, but you're an American citizen, you can absentee vote. It's very common. But in Israel, you can't do that. If you're not in Israel, you can't vote. So they have exceptions for diplomats and things like that. But if you're an Israeli citizen living in Toronto or in Florida, as often the case, then you can't vote. If you're not in the country, you can't vote. Like that. So anyway, that's who gets to decide is another debate that can be done. But at the present time, the way it is that Israelis who live in Israel are allowed to vote on these issues. That's how it is. And so this is very much a domestic issue that outside people don't really get a say. Whether they should get a say or they don't get a say, they don't. Because they don't have the ability to vote. Okay? So I think that's domestic. On the other hand, during Pesach, you've had rockets coming into Israel from outside. You had a lot of smack talk coming from Lebanon, which of course is really coming from Iran. You had other smack talk coming out of Hamas in Gaza, which is also to some degree coming from Iran. You had a lot of people saying a lot of stuff. You had rockets flying, not so many, thank God, but some. And you had a general feeling, leading up to Ramadan and at the beginning of Ramadan, that there was going to be a lot of trouble. That is not a domestic issue, right? That is an issue for all Jews and all supporters of Israel all over the world. That's very much an issue that affects all Jewish people, and all Jewish people have a say in that. To a large, people defend Israel in your own communities, but also to support Israel. Meaning, I'm not saying there's no way to send money to support the judicial, whatever legislation thing you're into. But that's not really, in my opinion, the role of Jews in the diaspora. The role of Jews in the diaspora is for these bigger these bigger issues, the outside threats, and those outside threats are real. I wouldn't say they're as dire as maybe some news media would want you to think they are. And they're not spectacular either, but they're not as, horrific. People are not walking around Israel cowering or anything like this. People are pretty confident. Nobody wants war, but like thinking of 6-Day War, nobody wanted war, but everyone feels like if we have to, we have to. We have what to do. So I think those are very important, different things. The domestic debates, and then the, so to speak, outside threats. Because you have these crazy situations right now that you see a lot on social media. You see that these protesters are coming to Israeli embassies in different places, right? And some of them are protesting judicial reform, and some of them are calling for death of all Jews. And they're standing next to each other, and it's like insanity. It's like, do you people even realize what's going on? If you look at these people, you're like, you're complete idiots. Like, what are you doing? Do you support? I mean, what are you? Why would you ever? Because they're confused. They say, well, we really think this domestic. No, this domestic issue is handled in Israel. We have a lot of protests about it. If you want to protest, come on over and get in the protest. Not that I support that in any way, but you can do it, especially if you're a citizen, but even if you're not. But if you're not, if you're going to be outside the country and you're going to be with people who are calling for the destruction of Israel, and God forbid the massacre of Jews, like what on earth? I mean, why do you have any part in that whatsoever? It is just unbelievable, the lack of seemingly any kind of intelligent thought that has gone into this. You may feel very strongly about these legislative issues in Israel. Okay, but that is not the way to express it. You're mixing things up over here. You don't even have a say in that. You do have a say to some degree in how Israel is perceived around the world and how to make that presence look strong and unified, to have a unified front against our enemies. You can't go and stand with our most, some of the stuff that is said at these things is absolutely crazy. And then these people are standing right next to it and they don't know what to do. And it's like, well, go away. Don't stay there, like, what are you doing? What were you doing there in the first place? And you see these scenes and you're just like, but these scenes are also playing out, not just in these protests, but all over social media. You have people who are ostensibly pro-Israel posting all this negativity about Israel. And then other people who like really hate Israel and want to kill us all are like picking up on it. And like, it's become some kind of bizarre party of sorts, that could have very serious ramifications. So I just think that's a very important point that seemingly a lot of people are missing. I think a lot of people are getting also, but seemingly a lot of people are missing. They're like, listen, family business is handled within the family, but you don't you don't have to watch The Godfather 1,000 times to understand, like, this is not how you run a family, this is just crazy. And I think it's very important to stress that. And I think for Jews, especially in the diaspora, of course, now is the time to support Israel. And again, regardless of how you feel about these domestic legislative efforts, which, by the way, most people don't understand anyway, because they are very complicated. I'm not claiming that I understand them completely either. They've been crafted by legal scholars. And of course, there are other legal scholars who are against them. So, it is a thing. And it doesn't mean you can't have an opinion on it just because, the whole thing in America, you remember that when they appointed the Supreme Court justice and they asked her what a woman was and she said, I'm not a biologist. Okay, you don't have to do that. That's a little, just because you're not a legal scholar doesn't mean you can't have an opinion. But, it is complicated. And so I think for the people who are thinking straight, they would say, look, I see what's going on. I see it's maybe a difficult time on some level. Okay, by Jewish history standards, it's very not difficult, right? But okay, we're having a bit of a tiff over here, or whatever you want to call it. All right, so I'm going to support Israel, but not connected to this whole thing. I'm just going to make sure that we're strong, and we're unified in a level that our real enemies can see and say, well, this is, because our enemies are trying to portray the situation as if the entire Jewish people have fallen apart. We all hate each other. We're all at each other's throats, and they're going to be able to just waltz right in and do whatever they want to do. Now, of course, the ones who are actually in charge of the terrorist organizations are well aware that's not the situation, which is why, of course, they're not actually doing it, right? Because they know that they'll get slaughtered. But there's enough idiots and crazy people out there who might not get that memo, and that's what you got to worry about a little bit. Again, it's not going to be crazy catastrophic, but you want to avoid also the other catastrophes as well, the terrorist attack and this, that, and the other. So you have to be very careful with how you navigate this situation. I think most people on some level have like a instinctive reaction, and they know not to do stupid things. But then you turn on Facebook or Twitter, and you're like, well, that guy didn't know. Well, that guy didn't know either. So that guy, So you say you see it, So I would say that now is the time to double down when it comes to Israel, and when it comes to the Jewish communities throughout the diaspora as well, and seeking unity, and not just also seeking unity, but also pushing unity, and saying, like, I'm not going to fall for this. It's really a trap. It's really like a trap that's put out there. I don't know if it's as organized as people say. I'm not so sure if it's so organized, but whether it's organized or not, it's a bit of a trap to try to trap us in some kind of understanding that the whole the sky is falling, the whole country's falling apart. I mean, I had people tell me, I had a guy tell me yesterday on Shabbos, he said, I don't know if it's worth investing in Israel now because who knows what's going to be. And I was like, whoa, I don't know about the interest rates are an issue, but like besides that, I think everything is okay. Like, I think people are really buying this stuff. And the Arabs are screaming it, but they don't believe it, because if they believed it, they would come and try to do something, but they know it's not true. They're just looking to see who out there is going to fall for this, So I'm saying here now, don't fall for it. That's what I'm saying. Don't fall for it, and do the opposite. Push the other way, push the other narrative, support whatever you can support, and in both in Israel and in the diaspora communities, because that is what gives us strength. And we're just projecting weakness, which is just stupid, and it's artificial, but nonetheless, we have to be very careful to not fall into that. And I think that's the main point I wanted to stress tonight. We're coming up on certainly what I think will be a very active summer. A lot of people, of course, are asking about the potential for war, unfortunately, or some kind of prolonged conflict. That is certainly there. Like, we're not going to say that's not there. That would not be realistic. However, the current Israeli government, you've probably heard people are worried about them. Certainly on the left, people are very worried. And normally I like to try to be like a bit of a calming, but in this particular case, I would say they very much have what to worry about. They very much have what to worry about, because this current government, people are complaining on the right that they're not doing enough. You hear a lot of that, and that's okay. But like the people who are in this government, I mean, there are some real ideological people in this government. These are not politicians. They're not, people just looking for jobs. A lot of these people had other, maybe even better jobs. These are people who've been raised to serve the Jewish people with a certain focus going forward. And that's where they're going to go. That is very much where they're going to go. They're going to lead the country in a direction that honestly probably hasn't been seen since Menachem Begin was elected and maybe even more. So they have what to be worried about. That's for sure. This is not a government that is looking to be a caretaker. We've had caretaker governments in Israel for the last few years, where not much has gotten done, and there's advantages to that on some level. But this government is not looking to be a caretaker government. They are elected, they have a majority, and they plan to do a lot of things. And until now, they have the judicial reform whole situation, they have the pushback, they have Ramadan, they have Pesach, there's a bunch of stuff. Now, we got Shavuos coming up. It's one day in Israel. It's not even 2 days. And, so we have a summer. We have a long summer coming up. So it's going to be very interesting. It's definitely going to be very interesting. You have the Biden administration, which, it's so sad. You say the Biden administration, people laugh. It's like, it's really come to that, but they can't seem their rhetoric is somewhat harsh, but no one cares. It's like no one can take it seriously. Now I wrote this week in my news update about that America has a person, the U.S. Ambassador of International Religious Freedom. It's a fascinating title. And this guy goes around rescuing people from persecution, but probably not. And he happens to be Muslim and from Wyoming, which is like amazing. Anyway, so he's Muslim and from Wyoming, and we graduated from college together, which I just realized when I looked him up when I was writing the thing. I don't remember him. We didn't hang out at the same parties, but we graduated from college in the same college together. Like I don't know. He did it only 2 years, so we weren't freshmen together. But he's like the opposite of Vince Carter. Vince Carter stayed 2 years and left, and this guy came 2 years and finished. But so this guy, he says Israel needs to work on the egalitarian section of the Western Wall. The U.S. government wants to see that move forward. First, I was like, whoa, bro, like what does this have to do with you? Besides that, you're a Muslim. Like, do you know what's going on the Temple Mount? Like, how's the egalitarian section on the Temple Mount going? Like, is this some kind of, like, if this guy was like I don't know what, like, I don't know, like an atheist guy from, Vermont, maybe we could say, okay, fair, he doesn't know what this stuff is. But this guy's a Muslim guy, like, he's pushing egalitarianism, like, this is craziness, Like, how can he even say this seriously? No one's going to take this seriously. And I think that tweet, in many ways, really kind of was a microcosm of the entire Biden foreign policy. It's like they say things, and maybe they're a little scary at first, but then you're just like, what? That's silly. It's silly, I think, is the word that really would best sum up the administration. They're just kind of silly. And, it's just kind of they're very difficult to take seriously, And so therefore, I don't think that will be any kind of barrier. In Israel just now, the news came out. I don't want to get into something that's a little too small, but it's interesting. It was suggested that maybe Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to appoint a woman from the Knesset, Mai Golan, to be the Consul General in New York, because the previous Consul General was an extreme leftist and he quit. Right, so now they have to put somebody else in. So he suggested this woman from the Knesset, and there's all kinds of pushback on it because she's right wing and all kinds of stuff like that. So now it kind of looks like it's not going to be her, which is unfortunate. I don't know if she's probably do a fine job. I don't think whatever. But now the rumor going around is that maybe it's going to be Caroline Glick, who is a well-known right-wing person who speaks obviously very good English and is an incredible communicator. And nothing against the other woman, but I think she's like one of the, like the left are going to lose their minds over this one, So if she actually gets the job, which I don't know how realistic it is, it will just show how ridiculous the pushback was to begin with. So there's going to be a lot of stuff like that. That's what I'm trying to suggest. There's going to be a lot of stuff where people, for whatever, again, silly reason, are going to try to push an agenda against the current Israeli government. But the results may be the opposite of what they're trying to do, and the opposite by a lot. You end up with Caroline as your consul general in New York, which is just, I mean, can you imagine? Anyway, like what right-wing person ever dreamed of such a situation, you know? But really with this Knesset, it's actually possible. So I would just say that it's not going to be boring. It's not going to be boring. And if it is, I'll be very surprised. It's not going to be boring. And I think our enemies in general, it's unfortunate that they exist, of course, but I think they understand that now is probably not the time. It could be, by the way, that Israel thinks that now is the time. And that could be very bad news for them. But certainly for Iran and for others. You see that Israel is definitely more aggressive in Syria in the last few weeks. You see that very clearly. I think there was an attack just now before we started. So that's clear. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff because they have the political backing. We have the ability. We don't have the real international pressure, any kind of real stuff. So that's the recipe for to get a lot done. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think you see a lot getting done. You have plans. I think one of the first things you're going to see is coming up on Yom Ha'atzmaut, of course, but after Yom Ha'atzmaut, you have Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. And historically, that's often a time where the city of Jerusalem and the government push forward programs to strengthen the Jewish presence in Jerusalem. And this hasn't happened so much in the last few years because of the problems with the government. But now there's literally proposals that have been sitting around for years, ready to go. And you've already seen in the last few months, some of the more leftist publications are already fretting over the situation, even though it hasn't happened yet, but they see it's coming. So again, these proposals are not new. Many of them, they've been worked on for years. But now, Higi Azman, as they say, now the time has arrived. So there's going to be reactions to that, and of course, but I don't think anything, too crazy. I think it's going to be it's going to be like a fun roller coaster ride where hopefully no one gets hurt. But at the end we say, oh, I'm glad we did that. So I think that's where we're headed. So I guess questions? Yeah.
Listen, guys, okay, so go ahead, you first.
So one of the things that I heard Netanyahu say was that these legislative reforms are similar to the notwithstanding clause in Canada. And he said Canada is a democracy. They have do you know what the notwithstanding clause?
No.
So Canada has a charter of rights and freedoms, guarantees certain rights and freedoms to people. And if the government, a province, passes a law that people take to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says this violates the charter of rights and freedoms, which means it's oppressive, the government can say, well, notwithstanding that we recognize the Supreme Court decision, we overrule it. So to me, and he said that Canada's democracy. Yes, Canada's a democracy, but to me that's not democratic. And even the Prime Minister instituted, Pierre Trudeau would agree if he was alive today, that he would regret. But he said it was a compromise. So what Netanyahu says is like the notwithstanding clause. It's like, well, to me that says governments will use that power to, invoke oppressive laws. So wouldn't it make more sense to change the process for appointing Supreme Court judges?
Well, I think there's a lot of proposals. One of them is to try to determine how to. I give an example. Today, right? It's almost like we have a gift today, right? So right now in Israel, there was a situation that happened today where the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, part of his responsibility is to determine which Arabs from Judea and Samaria can enter Israel. And generally it's for work, and it's work permits, and it's handled all by bureaucrats, obviously. And then there's other exceptions like hospitals, visiting people in hospital, humanitarian situations. Then there's religious situations. They want to go pray somewhere. They have all these different criteria that enable people to come, and they're all handled more or less by bureaucrats, mostly. However, there is an extreme left program that they try to do every year for Yom HaZikaron, right, which is Tuesday, right, where they say Israel remembers Israeli soldiers who were killed and also victims of terror. And there's people on the Arab side who remember the terrorists that killed them, right? And they got killed in the process, right? So there's an idea, an extreme left idea, to have a joint ceremony of those people together. The family, well, they're all dead. So the families of the different sides, right, have a joint ceremony together. Okay, so Israelis aren't allowed to go into Area A in the Palestinian Authority. So you can't do it, and it would be very dangerous. So you can't do it there. So the only alternative is to do it in Israel. But in order to do it in Israel, so those families have to get permits to come in. They're not work permits, they're not religious permits, and they're not humanitarian permits. Right? There's different kind, right? I guess a political permit of some sort, right? Okay, so Yoav Galan said no. No, I don't want to. What do they do with this? I'm not giving permits for these people. They don't get permits, right? Because he's the defense minister. It's his job to make this decision, right? The Supreme Court, they appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, it doesn't seem right not to let them in. They didn't say there's a law that says they're allowed to get in, because there certainly isn't. They have no right to come in. Nobody has a right to come in. But they said, well, they've been allowed in the past, and, we don't really like the way he handled it. And it's so late in the game. So we're going to say they can come in. Well, why do we even have Yoav Galan in this job? And what's the point? What are we spending all this money for? Or we could just say, if we want to hear from you, we'll call you. But why should we make any decisions? We'll just say, whatever decision needs to be made, we'll ask them. They're not elected, but they know what's right. So that's a bit of an extreme example. It's also a very timely example. But that goes on all the time. And it's I'm not saying what they're trying to do necessarily is a perfect fix. I'll give you another example. That would make it even more controversial in a way, right? It's not Haredim, it's actually yeshiva students being drafted into the army, because it's not just Haredim, it's any yeshiva students, right? And so they have an exemption. So the number of people who have the exemption has gone up over the years, as the number of yeshiva students has gone up over the years. Okay, so what do you do about that? What do you do about it? Okay, well, there's only a few possibilities. One possibility is to revamp large sections of the army that can accommodate the lifestyles of these people, right? Which will cost a fortune and will cause a lot of fighting amongst the left as to how we're going to make this work, right? Or you can just say, you know what? We're just going to keep the same system as it is. And the army has decided, until now, to keep it the way it is, more or less. They have a few certain units that enable people to go on some level, but it's not really at the level that it would need to be for large numbers of people to go. And the army's well aware of this. It's not like they don't know what's going on. They're well aware of it. And they choose this to be the better way to go. But the Supreme Court says no. Supreme Court says, no, we don't like this. We don't like this at all. We don't like this law. We don't like the way it is. Figure it out. You draft everybody or come up with something better. And they come up with a new law, and a new law, and a new law, and a new law. And they get rejected by the Supreme Court. Oh, and this is going on for decades. Right? So the people, and then they have these polls, but the polls mean nothing. So, the people don't want this thing. There is not the desire of the people are not to make this thing happen. But the Supreme Court clearly does, or can't seem to figure out. So it's like one of those things where you're looking at it and you're just like, listen, you can only fight against the people so much here. And that's exactly what you have right now. They went too far. They've just gone too far.
Right, but wouldn't it make sense to adopt a system like in the United States for appointing Supreme Court justices and to be able to say, well, this is the way it's done in the United States?
But don't forget the United States also has a constitution. So theoretically, the Supreme Court in the United States is supposed to base their decisions on the Constitution.
Right, no, but still, I mean, you see that as each party, appoints their judges, there's shift in the decisions there. But,
And it reflects the populace.
well, but
Yeah.
still, it reflects, when the Republicans are, they appoint conservative judges, the Democrats, they appoint them more liberal judges. So it kind of balances out, but it seemed to me, if Netanyahu said, well, we're adopting the way of appointing judges as they do in the United States, who could argue with that? I couldn't see Quebec. If he starts saying, but the notwithstanding clause, he's got from Quebec where the government.
Well, again, it's two different proposals.
has all kinds of oppressive laws.
It's two different proposals. What you're saying is that they should be appointed differently. I think, that's one thing, right? Right now, they appoint themselves. They appoint each other. And then there's the other thing, which is the override clause. And you're saying, so the override, first of all, for example, in America also has an override clause. It happens to be very extreme. You have to have 3/4 of the states to override a Supreme Court decision, make a new amendment to the Constitution. Now that's happened. That's happened throughout history. It doesn't happen very often, but it has happened. So even America has that, and so between Canada and America, there's a lot of room there. So Israel's trying to find the balance. I think a lot of people would agree that if the Knesset passes a law with 61 votes, and then the Supreme Court says, no, we don't like that law, and then it goes back to the Knesset, and they pass it again with the same 61 votes, and they override the Supreme Court, then theoretically the Supreme Court has no power at all. So that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense either, right? So you got to come up with a balance somewhere. I think most people agree with that. I think we'll agree with that, but I think most people agree that there needs to be a balance, but most people also agree there needs to be change. So, and I think what you're seeing with the protests is there's a lot of Israelis who want change, and they want a little bit more this way, and there's a lot of Israelis who understand there needs to be change, but they want it a little more this way. And then you have the extreme on the end who don't want anything changed, and they're the ones who make the most noise, and they're the ones you hear about. And I think that's maybe somewhat of a description. Lou, do you have anything?
I did.
Yeah.
First of all, awesome to see you.
Great to see you. Nice surprise.
Yeah. Ben and I go way back. Of all the moving parts in the Middle East, there are always a million moving parts in the Middle East, military-wise. The one that really intrigues me is the fact, and you referenced it already, that the Israelis are being super aggressive in Syria, attacking what we all think are Iranian assets. So tell me for that to happen, I think Russia has to have a look the other way, or actually give them a green light. It looks like a trade-off of what's going on in Ukraine. The Israelis did not support Ukraine 100%. When you get to about the Israelis' response to the war in Ukraine, the majority of the Israeli population, are they comfortable with the government stance?
So I think, first of all, it's a very good question. First of all, I would say that keep in mind, this was already going on in Syria before Russia attacked Ukraine. So we already had this kind of situation, this, if you want to call it a relationship, or maybe what do you call it, a volatile relationship with Russia. That yes, very much so. Russia has to look the other way, because otherwise you're just going to have at least a traffic accident, if nothing worse.
Yeah.
So yes, very much it seems that Russia understands. Russia has their interests in Syria, but I think they do understand Israel. It's easy to understand Israel's concern, and I think Israel's been very clear to Russia about that situation. So I think it's, as far as geopolitical things in the world go, this is one of the better, healthier relationships that people both understand each other. Then the war broke out in Ukraine, Russia. I think that because so to speak, the relationship was kind of grandfathered in. If you were to go back and redo it now, I'm not sure exactly how it would go. But despite the fact that there are many Ukrainians and many Russians in Israel. I don't know what the exact numbers there are, but there's quite a few of both. But has the Israeli government, the people, the overwhelming majority of Israelis are not so interested in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Maybe the more recent immigrants a little bit more, but even them, I think it's one of those things where Israel is not the one who's going to make the difference on any level. I mean, you look at the American government involvement with Ukraine, avoiding all the scandals and everything like that. But you know, they're very seriously involved. Israel cannot do anything similar to what America is doing, even if they wanted to. I mean, not just the amount of money is just incredible, you know? So, it's like one of those things where it's like, I don't really have a say anyway, so why am I going to say it? You know? And we have this situation with Russia in Syria. And it's I wouldn't call it a healthy relationship, but it seems to work for both sides on some level. And it's withstood quite a few tests.
And keep it your faith.
And it keeps Israel relatively, safer. And we haven't had any catastrophes with them, which is actually surprising because you would think something would go wrong. But anyway, so since that's the case, nobody wants to touch it. You know, it's like the display in the grocery store that you're not sure if it was a good idea to build, but no one's going to touch it. You know, like, you don't want the whole thing to collapse. So Israel is not involved in that conflict. I mean, they're involved on some level, but on a very low level. And Israelis are not clamoring in any way for more involvement. It's just not, it's ironically, even though we have so many people from those places, ironically, it's just not our fight.
Was the fact that Putin and the Russian government shut down that portal from Russia to Israel for immigration into Israel, they shut that down because the Israelis weren't supportive of whatever.
Yeah.
Is that a big deal?
No,
it was not.
no, and it's not really shut down. It was like Putin. No, you know, he's a clever guy. Yeah, he's good at making things look a certain way, and then they're like not really that way. Any Jew who wants to leave Russia, you know, can't. You know, maybe you can't do it the way they used to do it, so you know, a certain way, but they can. So no one's feeling. No. I mean, again, it's a very difficult situation in Ukraine. You know, and it's, you know, not to be, you know, it's a serious situation, but I think it's just not our situation right now. Yes.
Two questions. One is, from where you stand, what do you think of the future of in broadening the Abraham Accords in Saudi Arabia, particularly with their diplomatic rapprochement with Iran? And number two, this next few months, summer, what is in your view, the biggest surprise, putting on your crystal ball head, surprise incident that may happen?
Well, first of all, I think in terms of the Abraham Accords, I think it's inevitable that they will be enlarged to other countries. I'm not exactly sure how quick Saudi Arabia is going to join, which I think is a reflection of their weakness, not their strength. They're not joining because they're scared, not because they're strong. But there are other countries, certainly in Africa, Muslim, non-Arab countries, that are certainly looking to join. And there's even some other Muslim countries, again, not necessarily Arab, who are probably looking to join. Indonesia. I think, and I think the problem really is with America. I mean, the Abraham Accords, as much as it was great that Israel and the Arab countries were able to, you know, come to them, America played a very large role in those accords, and it's just not in the cards right now.
Why?
Well, because President Biden, no one takes him seriously. No one takes him seriously. I mean, if I'm Indonesia or Pakistan and I want to take a risk, it's not going to be with that guy. You know, so that's, I think, probably the bigger problem right now. You know, Netanyahu is back in power. You know, so the Arabs say, okay, that's, you know, we can work with these people, but we need the Americans as like the guarantor, and they're just not there. So, and that's almost certainly the case with Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia have a case where the Biden administration came in, just absolutely ripping Saudi Arabia. And now what's going to happen? Now all of a sudden they're going to be like, okay, we guarantee the deal. Like what? No, we don't like you. You know, so I think it's the Abraham Accords. I think the answer to that is yes, you will see expansion How fast will you see it? I'm not sure. And the reason is because of the American administration. Not because of Israel, and ironically not because of the Muslims, but because of America. And the other, and then the crystal ball, that's, I don't know. I think that, and I will preface this by saying there could be some wishful thinking in this, but I think that there was a situation that happened when President Trump was in office and Netanyahu was in office near the beginning over there, and Prime Minister Netanyahu got up and basically gave a whole speech where he said he was going to annex the Jordan Valley, and there was a whole map and everything. It was all kind of there, and it was, I wouldn't say a done deal, but it was one of those situations where it was a done deal except for the signing, that kind of thing. And then it didn't happen. And I think Netanyahu very much regrets that. Very much regrets that didn't happen. I think that was an easy accomplishment on some level for him at that time, and that would have made him a very historic achievement. It's also supported by an overwhelming consensus of the Israeli public and of the parties. I mean, I would say probably something close to half of the opposition parties would probably support it. So, I mean, you're talking about something that's probably supported by 80 to 90 members of the Knesset. I mean, there's a serious, majority, and it hasn't happened. And I think Netanyahu feels that he kind of failed on that a little bit, and I think he's looking for an opportunity to fix it. And that opportunity may present itself this summer.
Okay, but wasn't that the price to pay for UAE and Durant?
It was part of the price. But it wasn't. Netanyahu can argue, the art of the deal or whatever you want to say. He can say, I want to do all of Area C. I'll take the Jordan Valley. Or on the other hand, he could say, look, I'm going to take the Jordan Valley. He'll pull the same thing again, right? I'll take the Jordan Valley, or we need 4 more countries in the Abraham Accords. Who's signing up? Or I'm pulling the trigger over here. But again, I think Netanyahu senses that he lost an opportunity there. And Netanyahu does not want to be viewed, for better or for worse, as an extreme right prime minister. He wants to be viewed as a, fatherly, genius of a person, and the Jordan Valley gives him that opportunity. If he annexes Shechem, or, even, I don't know, the whole Area C, that is a right, that's a right-wing thing to do. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but then that's a right-wing thing to do, But if he annexes the Jordan Valley, that's not a right-wing thing necessarily. That's something that a lot of people support. They just can't figure out how to do it. And I think that could be his go-to, so to speak. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with his criminal trial. He's not the youngest man in the world. He's not the oldest man in the world, but he's not the youngest man in the world. And how long who would have thought he'd still be going now? So, maybe he wants to keep going, but maybe he doesn't, or whatever. So that could be his thing.
So given that, what's the future of the conflict in your view? The 2-state solution, something else? What's going to happen?
Well, I mean, President Trump, he had his plan to the vision of peace, the vision for peace, I think it was called. Now, objectively speaking, I'm not saying my opinion on the plan itself, but it was completely brilliant. It was a brilliant plan, and it was based on his, real estate views of the world, negotiation, and it was really quite brilliant. And again, I'm not saying I agree with it, but it was brilliant. And so he basically said, listen, here's the deal. Whoever accepts the deal gets rewards. Whoever rejects the deal gets negatives, and it gets worse or better, however far this goes. Well, that's kind of how life works in general. You can pretend like that's not the way life works, but that's kind of how life works. So the longer you go, depending on how you play the game, you're either doing better or you're doing worse. You don't get to just stay in the same place. The Arabs want to stay in the same place, without, they don't want to move.
Hamas rejected it before he even saw it.
That's right, which is a perfect example of the situation. and Israel accepted it more or less before they even saw it. So that, with that said, I think, there's this map. I don't know if you've seen this. It's all over online. There's these 4 maps that the Arabs use for propaganda. The green maps. Have you seen those? Yeah. So okay, they're not exactly an accurate portrayal of history, but I like to pretend they are. But you see it like from their perspective, distorted perspective. They're basically saying, I read a book recently that I actually found in the airport in Israel, right? In the bookstore in the airport in Israel. And there's some like solid anti-Semitism in this book. Like, it's well done. Well done. Not like it was be sold in Israel. It's crazy. Anyway, but there was also some very interesting points from this anti-Semite. And one of the things he kept harping on was the fact that he didn't acknowledge that Transjordan, which of course was ahead of its time with that name, but Transjordan, before they transitioned into Jordan, that was supposed to be part of Israel as part of the right. So they don't acknowledge. He doesn't acknowledge that. So that's of course out. But he would say from the rest of the mandate, right? Israel got, I believe he says, and I assume it's somewhat accurate, I'm not sure, 78% of the land, and the Arabs and the Arabs, got nothing, and they're trying to give them 22%, which he, I guess, would say is the West Bank and Gaza, right? It's 22% of the whole area. I'm assuming that's true. That's probably close, if not true, right? So he's saying the Arabs are settling for 22%, and you're saying, well, how about we go down to 21 or 20%? And the Arabs saying we already went down to 22%. We're not going down any farther. Well, I beg to differ. I think they're going to go down much farther, and I think that, that's just going to happen. Like you were offered 22%. You said no. So get ready for 15%. I don't know. That's how things work. Yeah. Exactly. So again, those maps, while not being historically accurate, may actually portray somewhat of a trend. Now, there are, of course, Israelis, or say more right-wing Israelis, who would say, what do you mean? We had Shechem, we had Jenin, those were not under Palestine, those were under Israeli control. And we lost them. And we had Gaza, and we lost it. And we had the Sinai, and we lost it. Okay. There's something to be said there. On the other hand, we had those areas. Okay, that's not so clear. We had them, but there were no Jews there. Okay, like what is that exactly worth? To a Jewish state, land where no Jews are. So okay, but so they have what to say. But I think that in general, that 22% is not going up, and it's probably going down. I think that's what's going. Yes, Robert.
You said in the next few months, there's lots of things. So I've been out all 3 days to look at it. Eviatar, Homesh. They took down one community in Delhill, which I don't understand. Perhaps you can explain it. It's in the Green Line. And the second part, after you answer that, you foresee a lot of building in Jerusalem proper and all those areas of East Jerusalem. So first, the one about the.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of people on the right wing, so to speak, who are complaining about the situation in Homesh and the situation at Eviatar, and they're saying, why isn't it going faster? Okay, that's how government works, slowly, slowly and inefficiently. So yeah, you would like it to go faster. Could it go faster? I'm sure it could on some level, but at the end of the day, it's going to take a little bit of time. But at the end of the day, both Homesh, which is a community that was destroyed during the disengagement in 2005, and Eviatar, which was established a few times, but most recently about 2 years ago, both in the Samaria and the Shomron, north of Jerusalem, they're both going to become, they're actually both yeshivas. They're both scheduled to be yeshivas. It's going to happen. It has taken longer than maybe people would have liked. But the Homesh is a completely operating yeshiva already. So those things are going to happen. So I think that people are impatient and they want to see things move faster, and I can understand that. But I think you just have to let the system, however inefficient, work its way to that goal. But I don't think there's any hindrance to any of that. In terms of the place in Arbel in the Galilee, even though it's inside the Green Line, the reality is in the Galil, similar to all areas that are heavily Arab, there is rampant illegal construction. And the reason there's rampant illegal construction, there's a few reasons, but one of the reasons is that the Arab society, primarily Muslim, but also others, they have a different view of property, of real estate law than the Western way. And so, whereas in Toronto, if you were to build a building on somebody else's property or on property that's just not yours, you would not be so shocked when the authorities showed up and caused you some problems. Here, this is how things are done. This is how things are done. So you have rampant illegal construction because they just look at it differently. Here's a piece of land in the village. It's not registered to me. No one's done a safety check. No one's figured out how this is going to work with the utilities, or the environment. Forget the environment, and all this stuff. No one's done any of that stuff, but I decided to build a house on it because it works for me, And Israel says, well, okay, that's how you do it. So, whatever, figure it out amongst yourselves. But then when Jews try to do it, the government says, no, we do it a different way. You can't do it exactly like that. And so a lot of times, actually, what will happen is Jews will do it like the Arabs. And then Israel will find a way to kind of, retroactively legalize it. Right? Which should never be done on some level. I mean, if you build something illegal, I think most people would agree that if you build something illegal, so there should be a price to that. Generally, that's how we view law and order, right? But in Israel, it's a bit of a hybrid. And if somehow or another you get the thing built and you have the right connections, you'll be retroactively approved. So that's what's going on in the Galil. They're trying to build a community on land where the government approved at one point the building of a community, but then didn't do it. So then other people showed up and they did it, which of course is not legal, right? But their point is that really the government does support this. Why can't you just retroactively allow it? And that probably is what will happen. But in the meantime, there are certain people within the government, or not the government, but within the bureaucracy, what they call in America the swamp, right? Who just, they just, for whatever reason, have decided that they're going to target this place. They don't like these people. So, that's what happened in that situation. They destroyed the area. But again, it's more of a bureaucratic stumbling block. Now, if these people weren't there trying to settle this place, it is possible that the government would just forget all about it. So they are doing a valuable service. Why does it have to be this way is, of course, a question we constantly ask ourselves in Israel. But this is the way that they were. Just so you know, where this place is, the Arbel, is actually right next to where the Crusades were defeated in Israel. It's like a shocking scene over there. You could see, you read the history, and then you can totally see how it happened. And it's like wild. It's just like right in your face. Like, you get it. But they were literally pushed, like in a cartoon or something, to like a cliff. And like, that was it. That was the end. Like, either went off the cliff or you got killed by the Muslims, and well, that's how it ended. And you can see the whole thing. Like, it's exactly where it happened. Like if you go up there, you're like, oh yeah, I can't go anywhere. Just a cliff, or back the way I came. That's it. So that's where that place is, which is obviously historically very, very significant place. But again, all those places, there's a lot of complaining, and I'm not saying it's not justified complaining. I'll give you another example that you didn't bring up. In Hevron, there are 2 buildings that were bought by Jews in the last year and a half. And everyone knows that when you buy a property from Arabs, you can't register it beforehand, because that puts the Arab's life in risk. That puts your ability to go into the house. The neighbors are all going to take over. You have a certain secrecy that has to be maintained. and you have to establish your presence in the house. And therefore, you can't get a permit beforehand because that's a public thing, and it's just not going to work. Okay, you have to do it retroactively. All right. So okay. So there's 2 houses there that Jews have purchased, and they're not allowed to be in to live. They haven't received the permit of the purchase. But everybody knows that. As a matter of fact, in one of the houses, the Arabs in jail by the Palestinian Authority. So they definitely believe it's a purchase. So of course these buildings were purchased. Of course money changed hands. It's all documented. It's all, it's all there. Why? It's been 4 months. What's going on? Why Jews aren't allowed in these? Yeah, that's good. It will be. It will take longer than we think it should take, but it will happen probably in the near future, and if not, in the close to near future. And these bureaucracies take time. Israel has a very well-known, solidly terrible reputation bureaucracy. And, you can't get a passport right now. Good luck with that. So, we got a lot of issues like that. Jerusalem, I think you're going to see, listen, everyone knows in Israel, we have a massive problem with lack of housing. We have a housing shortage. It takes a long, I just saw a friend here now, and he says they hope to get a shovel in to start building their house in the summer and be done in a year. Because have to build a house built in a year. And I was like, really? That's unbelievable. And he's like, well, we've had so many delays and it's so annoying, and and I'm just like, what? In Israel, it takes a very long time to build houses for some reason. It's only like a 3-year process. And so, building houses is expensive and it takes time, and we have a housing shortage and we have a growing population. We have a big problem. And so any project that gets built is going to get sold. It's going to get, it's going to go. So, I think there's no way out of the building. And the ironic thing about Jerusalem is, right, if we keep in mind from 1967, there's East Jerusalem, North Jerusalem, South Jerusalem, and then West Jerusalem, right? And West Jerusalem, people think about kind of like more like where Yad Vashem is. If you've been over in that area, there's a big forest over there. When you come into Jerusalem, from there's a bunch of trees all along, So the West Jerusalem is quite green as you leave the urban area. And the environmentalists have that's their war zone there. You try to build a house or a project in those forests, they just unleash on you, and they've been very successful in stopping development. Again, for better or for worse, whatever you're into, but for stopping development in those areas and preserving those forests, right? Ironically, those trees were planted to not specifically for future development, and that's why they're not fruit trees. That's why the JNF plants not fruit trees, so they can chop them down and build houses in their place. That's why they do that, right? But anyway, whatever. They like so. So what does that do? If you cut off the entire west side, what are you left with?
Yes.
The other 3, the north, south, and east. So that's where all the projects are. They're all in those areas, and they're all over the line. Right? They're going to all be over the green line, and that means they're all going to capture international headlines, right? But it's not necessarily because the local Jerusalem government is like, hey, let's mess with the world. It's like, no, those are the only areas we can build in. Those are the only directions we have, and they're all over the line. And the west side, we can't do anything. Can't touch it. It's all green. So even what? I don't know. There's called the Jerusalem Forest. There's yeah, exactly. Part of that, yeah. But even to more extreme, even a few hundred meters. I said meters because we're in Canada. A few hundred meters from the bus station going west, the central bus station in Jerusalem. Just a few hundred meters is what's called Lifta. And Lifta is supposed to be a massive housing project. And the environmentalists have just destroyed it. They've just, they're just tenacious. And they're like, it's going to ruin the landscape. It's going to ruin this thing. And again, whatever you're into. But they've been extremely successful. They've really been very successful. And so, again, anything you try to build to the west it's just going to get clobbered. And so what's left, you know, is the South, which is you're going to see the South is going to be the big one. I can't say that because the South and North and East are all going to be. Yeah, they're all there. There's projects in the South, I would say, of something like 3,000 to 4,000 units, which seems like a lot, right? But then you have one in the North, it's 10,000. So I guess that's more. But so yeah, they're all sides are pretty significant.
Just so it doesn't look like Tel Aviv at the end. With all the elements.
Yeah, well, no, you're gonna get that too.
You think so?
Well, the trend is that the city has allowed building anything on the light rail line.
Yep.
You can build huge structures now. So like in a neighborhood like Kiryat Moshe, which is near the bus station as well, all the buildings there, with a few exceptions, are 4 stories, 3 to 4 stories.
Right.
You see 3 to 4 stories, 3 to 4 stories, 3 to 4 stories, and then you have this monstrosity that's like, I don't know, 26 stories or something, and they're building a 40-story one next to it, across the street. And no, by the bus station. So it's just going to be, Pittsburgh is going to be a dwarf compared to these places, and they're building, and all in the city as well, in the middle of the city. Everything that's going up now is going to be because they're given the rights.
But using the yellow bricks.
Yeah,
How do you build 26 stores with that?
I don't know, but they do it. They're doing it, and it's the city is pushing everything, especially again if it's on that light rail.
Well, Jeff.
Anything along Jaffa or anywhere, and now the light rails are expanding.
Oh.
Once they start expanding those rails, theoretically they're going to expand the building rights along those too, and you're going to have towers. I don't know about Tel Aviv towers, but you're going to have
I love the fact that Israel is the only country in the world that has more trees now than it had 100 years ago.
right, and that doesn't mean it's going to stop. Meaning, even if they built in the west side, there's plenty more room to plant trees. But they've made that their war, and they've succeeded. And again, it's whatever you think about it. I don't really have such an opinion on it. I just think it's fascinating that a lot of the environmentalist kind of people, some of them, or a good number of them, tend to be more left wing, and they're the ones who are really pushing. They're kind of forcing the. By the way, it's a different interesting topic. I don't know, whatever. It's a little off our topic, but it's fascinating. Is we talk about, I'm involved to a large degree or some degree in Jews trying to establish presences in different neighborhoods, mostly where Jews lived historically, but in Jerusalem and in other places throughout the country. But the place where the most successful, and far and away, the most successful place where through real estate purchases and development, the demographics have been changed in Jews' favor is Yaffo. Yaffo has building after building after building after building. And who is it? Who's doing that? Leftists.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're all leftists. I mean, they're not necessarily crazy leftists, but they're Tel Aviv folk who Tel Aviv is too expensive for. And so Yaffo is right there and also on the water. And they come in and they bring their money and they find a property and they purchase it. They evict the poor people that live there, and they knock it down and they build a relatively large structure, and they sell all the apartments. It's good business, and they do one after another, and you're just like, wish I could do that, but I can't seem to figure it out. But you people are very efficient, and the Arab presence in Yaffo is in the toilet. Yeah, but. If you'd say to them, you see what you're doing, right? Oh, no. We would never. But you are. But no. But yeah. So
They've got a great bakery there.
yeah.
Go there all the time.
There's a lot of pluses. The crime was what kept people out. But you can walk, sure, and best believe a lot of people are now into their slightly cheaper apartments. So it's still quite expensive, but it's cheaper than Tel Aviv. So, you even have, you've had some pretty serious crime there amongst Arabs trying to figure out who owns which properties so they can sell to these developers because they're worth so much money. I mean, stuff that used to be worth, I don't know, maybe a few $100,000 are now maybe worth, I don't know, tens of millions of dollars. I mean, it's a rather significant difference, you know, and now trying to figure out exactly who owns this thing is a little more important, you know, and I'm not going to kill you over $20, but I mean, 20 million, maybe that's a discussion, you know? So, you have that going on in Yaffa, which is again, very ironic and something to see. Maybe we have something to learn from them. I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing. More questions? Sir.
So I heard of this recent round of attacks from Iran through Hezbollah, Hamas, you know, the rockets, has to do with the funding that they've received to Iran because of the Biden administration undoing the Trump lockdown on funds. Are you aware of any of that?
Well, first of all, it's important to point out that the rockets that came from Lebanon were not from Hezbollah. And that's important because, number one, they weren't so good. Hezbollah, unfortunately, has very good rockets. And the rockets that were fired were not very good rockets and didn't cause any damage, thankfully. Now, that's not to say that Hezbollah wasn't in on it. It wasn't aware of it and didn't let it go. They did. But it wasn't them. They didn't want it to be them because they were afraid. Instead, it was kind of these like little militias of little Palestinian militias that they allow to function. So that's important because it would have been different if it had been Hezbollah and Hezbollah had gotten up and said, you know, these are our rockets, we fired them. That would have been a different situation. Things would not have ended as nicely as they did, or for now. But yeah, that's certainly a very big concern. Iran, you know, is the one pushing all of these attacks. You know, President Trump, in addition to the financial things, it cannot be overlooked that he killed the head of the whole, what do you say in English? The whole system. Yeah, the head guy. And he was, and listen, you don't like to speak good about a terrible person, but this guy was a competent man. His business was terror, international terror, and he was very good at it. He was able to bridge gaps that were seemingly unbridgeable. Yeah, Soleimani. He would, you know, Sunnis, Shiites, Alawites. He was Mr. Peace when it came to killing Jews. So he could bring anybody together. And Trump killed him. So, I mean, that was a pretty big deal. He has a replacement, of course, but I mean, you can't compare. I mean, the other guy was just a legend. And so that hurt, that definitely set back Iran to a serious extent. They're trying to rebuild the whole thing, but it's you know, it's not so simple. But I would say, yes, there's a lot of, you know, listen, Iran is currently pushing a lot of the problems for their own purposes. They're using it. I mean, Iran is using Israel it's like a way to spread Shiite Islam. That's what they're doing. It's brilliant, obviously. But they're saying to the Sunnis, you had your chance, you blew it. Right? You continuously lost. And so it's our turn. Now it's our turn. And we'll show you how to destroy Israel. Because you couldn't figure it out. Yeah. Well, yeah, they'd be attacking Azerbaijan, you know, which they might do anyway. But yeah, they would have to fight somebody else because they need this. This is how they're going to spread their ideology. This is how things are done, unfortunately. But this is how things work. So they're using Israel as a way to spread their, meaning a real Sunni Muslim. One time when I was a rabbi on campus one time, and I actually had very cordial relations with the Muslims. You know, I guess being religious minorities and people of faith, if that's what, you know, we just had a lot in common and we spent a lot of time together. It was a little strange. But anyway, so one time I was talking to a Muslim guy and I said to him, I said, because they had prayer on campus. I wish we would have Jewish prayer on campus, but anyway, they had prayer on campus. And I said to him, I said, you know, just curious, I know this prayer is Sunni. You know, he's like, of course. And I said, what would happen? I said, do we have any, you know, what would happen if a Shiite Muslim came to the prayer. He's like, oh, no, that would never happen. So I mean, he could be a guy and he wants to pray, or at least see what it's like. I don't know, whatever. Maybe he would come for the prayer, No, he wouldn't. There are no Shiite Muslims here. I said, well, I think there could be, it's a big campus. Maybe they're not so religious or something. But yeah, it's likely there are, some Iranian guy somewhere here on this campus, it's like, and he's, no, they don't exist here. I know there are some. I know who they are. Okay, but like Sunni Islam, is not into Shiite Islam. They're very. Can you imagine saying that about a, God forbid, like a Reform Jew? He would not come to our prayers. It would be insane. I mean, it'd just be insanity. Oh, there are no such thing. They don't exist. It's just mind-boggling. It's a real rift. But Iran is saying, we're willing. We're gonna overcome this thing in order to kill Jews. That's what it takes to get past their problem. And so that's their strategy. So and you see, they talk to Hamas, which they shouldn't. Makes no sense. It's like us and the Jews for Jesus getting together to work on a project. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's not going to work. But they just Iran is, they talk to Islamic Jihad, than they have for years, and Hamas, Turkey, should not be into them in any way. Saudi Arabia with the reproach that shouldn't work. So Iran has this strategy, and they're they're pushing it, and they're very problematic. And anything that's done to help them is obviously not a great move, I would say. In the current, now you just had, by the way, you saw this in the news. The Shah's son just visited Israel. Again, I don't know how realistic it is for him to take over Iran, but it is important to point out that there's a large segment of Iranian society, how large can be debated or whatever, who aren't into this whole craziness, and they want to go back to the way things were before. Maybe they didn't want exactly the Shah. Maybe they want a little more democracy, maybe a little more civil rights or something like that. But they're not into this whole we're at war with the whole world thing all the time. And every time we try to, get a little bit of prosperity over here, you guys go and spend it on, blowing up stuff in Argentina or something. They're like, this is craziness. Who are you crazy people that are in charge of us? So there is hope in the future. I don't know if it's exactly the Shah's son, but whoever it is that could, come back in and kind of push things in a more Azerbaijani kind of way.
You haven't been to the house yet, you'll get to that. I'm about 3 miles north of here, 4 kilometers up in the Canada, 4 or 5 kilometers. And I go to the gym every morning. Tons of Persian guys work out. They don't come from Brady. Persian. Right. So in the song, we solve all the world's problems, right? And I think one day, a quote from my university day that said that, and you ultimately end up with the government you deserve it. They end up looking at Alex from Marx.
Yeah, they don't go that way.
No, and they think, you don't get it in Canada. Your biggest problem is to skate on yesterday or tomorrow and later. Yeah, control it, won't give it up.
Right.
And if you try, it's not even, we're not worried about it. That's our parents.
Absolutely. It's brutal.
And you have to believe on it.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of Iranians. Oh, certainly the ones here. Many Iranians here in America.
Huge population.
Yeah. Well, the reason they're here is because they can go back.
Not all the most.
Well, yeah. Or what?
Our anti-regime.
Yes, they're not into that. Not all, but a lot of them are not into
So many countries that overturned that.
it. Well,
Egypt did.
well, let me have help.
Yeah.
Let me have.
Hillary.
I don't know. I don't know if they would. It's a tough situation. These are not. These are, and they're not stupid people. We wish the Iranians were stupid, but they're not.
No, they were.
They're not so stupid. They're not so stupid. They're not so stupid, and they're quite brutal. And yeah, they're not, listen. They are aware of the situation too. They are well aware that their position is tenuous.
Oh, they are.
Well aware, and they take a lot of they have a lot of ways of holding the public down.
Yeah, but if that go back to then freedom isn't free.
Well, you're going.
Yeah, I'm just telling you, it's a tough situation. It's a tough situation, yeah.
So Abbas is 87. He's gonna not last forever. What do you think's gonna happen? Who's gonna come on top? What's gonna happen to the?
You know, there's a lot of people who have a lot of I don't know, called hope or whatever the word is, for Abbas is gonna die, you know, which is gonna happen. And then some guy who's so bad is gonna come in, the whole thing's gonna fall apart. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I mean, I think it's not so clear what's gonna happen. I think that you know, it's a mafia, you know, it's a traditional mafia situation. Okay, don't make it more than it is. Okay, it's a mafia. They get paid protection money from the outside, and they run their own little illicit, you know, activities. That's what it is, you know. You know, you see these videos online all the time of the Israeli army guys going in and arresting terrorists. You know, they know which house they're in. They know which bed they're in. I mean, how can they know that? Who do you think told them? House authority, right? Because they're the rival family. You know, so they're all Italian, but they're, you know, but they're the rival family. So, you know, this whole idea that Abbas is going to die, which, you know, is going to happen sooner rather than later, and everything's going to delve into chaos and this, that, and the other, could be, but might not be. You know, Arafat died. You know, that seemingly was the end of that. And Abbas came in and he held it together remarkably well under the circumstances. I mean, I don't even know if his heart even works, you know, 20%. And he's still running the thing on some level. You know what I mean? When was the last time you saw the guy like walking around? Like, you know, he's not in good shape. And he had elections 15 years ago, 16 years ago, 17 years ago, whatever it was. 4-year term, yeah. So he's doing it. You got to give the guy some credit. I mean, it's pretty impressive how he's pulled this off. And it could be there's somebody else who is just as, you know, competent at running this mafia operation, as long as everybody gets their money and whatever. So I'm not so sure it's going to be, you know, this bloodbath or whatever, but it could be. It certainly could be. You know, every time a big, you know, a leader is killed or dies, you never know what's going to happen next. So could be a bloodbath. Could be there's a lot of civil war. You know, definitely could be, but I don't think it's inevitable. A lot of people make it like it's inevitable, but I don't think it's so inevitable. I think it's in a lot of people's interest that there be chaos, but it's a lot of people's interest that there not be chaos. They're very happy, you know, with the situation. If you drive through Judea and Samaria, you will not see the Arab cars and say, you know, oh, this is such a sad situation. You say, oh, somebody's doing very well. You know, they want to maintain this situation. There's a lot of people who want to maintain the current situation. And there's a lot of Arabs who, frankly, are saying, if the Jews are going to stay, let's find a way to make this work for me. You see that a lot. So, you know.
Who would you put your bet on? Or Goody, Dalan?
Okay, but Goody's in jail. But Goody's in jail and he's not coming out. Because that's just, he killed people. You can't do it. You're not going to have Arafat too. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. And you have Mohammed Dahlan, but he's in the Emirates somewhere. So I can't say it's impossible, but I don't see how you can do it. It'll probably be one of the local guys who you never really heard of before. Yeah, one of these guys. And he'll just, it'll work for everybody.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's what I think. I don't want to get, because there's a lot of people very excited, oh, he'll die and then, it'll be great. Well, it'd be great that he's dead, but that might be the extent of it.
Careful what you wish.
Yeah, I'm saying, I don't think that someone's going to come in and be amazing and destroy us or something, God forbid. I'm not too worried about that. But to keep the mafia business going, Michael was no veto, but he still got things done. So, it could be some, and there could be some fighting. And I mean, there is fighting. There's already fighting now. Places like Jenin and Shrem, there's already fighting going on. But, I think, we look at all violence and we say, oh, violence bad. We'd like to see that. But in their society, it's just part of, it's part of the deal. So, it's not so horrible if a bunch of people get killed, and that's how we decide who the next leader is. That would be terrible in Canada, obviously. But in the Middle East, that's considered to be. Yeah, I mean, you see what's going on in Sudan right now, It's part of the thing. That's how else would you choose somebody? What are the other options really? So democracy, okay. We tried that one. But so I think that and it's funny because Hamas has control of Gaza, which seemingly is good, but it's really bogged it down. I mean, running a country is like a whole thing. Yeah, it's annoying. And they have all these problems, they're constantly having to deal with it. People keep calling and complaining. Yeah.
How much of a role do you think this political office are for speeches? Both the protests and in Israel and in terms of the South.
I think that there are people within the administration who are, how you call it in English? One second, let me think a second. They're like, what is that? Yeah, but they're not. But it's just silly. Meaning, like it's like they're annoyances. They're people who do embarrassing things, like this stupid tweet recently. Like, do you think the Arab wanted to tweet it? No, some Jew told him to tweet that nonsense.
I've heard everything from like just in terms of task support to actual money, operatives, staff, all the.
I think there's truth to all of that. There's truth to all of it. But the question is, what impact is it really having? And I question that. I question the amount of impact it's actually having. I think it's loudmouth, annoying people. Anyone's ever been to a Hillel on a campus, and certainly in America, has met these people. They don't have any impact, but they're annoying, and they have a talent of getting their annoyance in the newspaper or some other kind of publication that everybody reads and goes, "Oh my goodness, this is how all the Jews think." And you're just like, no, but yeah, no. Why do you have, So, like, I think there are a lot of people, Jews specifically, in the Biden administration, who are causing what we call in Hebrew fadichas, like there's these embarrassing things. But does it really matter? Meaning, like, is Israel gonna change the egalitarian section because the Muslim guy was told by the Jewish girl that sits next to him to make that tweet? I don't think so. I think it's just a lot of hot air, and I think I'm not saying they have no impact at all. I'm not saying but I think it's rather little. I think in the grand scheme of things, I think it's rather little. They make a lot of noise, but they don't. And now, like for example, this whole thing with Netanyahu and the possible consulate general lady. This woman rabbi said that if she comes over here, they're gonna, go at her. Okay, like what does that mean? So it does look like Netanyahu's backing away from the thing, but I don't think it's because that lady said she's gonna fight her or whatever she meant. That woman represents nobody. So it's just a lot of hot air. Yeah.
There's also been stories following up on that. The Mossad is agitated protest. I've read that.
Yes, and I think there's truth to that. I mean, I don't think it's the Mossad per se, but there are people within the Mossad. And the Mossad is run by Ashkenazi, secular Jews. There are exceptions, of course, but that's historically the people who run the Mossad. That's who runs the Air Force.
So what's the agenda?
The agenda is that they're very concerned that the country is going in a more religious, I would say Middle Eastern way, and away from the Western liberal democracy. Yeah, it's going in that direction, and that's the way they like that. Now, when they built the country, they didn't build it with that. It only came later. But they like that system now. That system's good for them now, and they want to maintain it against the. They don't want.
So do you think that's happening and a valid concern?
Yeah. Oh, it's a valid concern, but I think they should be concerned. Yeah, that's where it's going.
Really?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of Ashkenazi people who weren't so into bringing all the Sfardim to Israel. And they weren't wrong from their perspective, meaning, yeah, there's a lot of them. I think they're the majority. Well, so if you're going to have a democracy where the majority is not like you, so that's not, that's an issue. That's going to be an issue. So what do? Well, it's very simple what you do. You limit the amount that the democracy gets to decide, and you strengthen the side of the aristocracy through the judicial branch to keep those other people in check. Well, that's exactly what they did. The second the Spartan got together with Menachem Begin and got him elected, that's when you see all this Supreme Court stuff changing in the 80s. That's when it all started changing. All this, anybody can petition the Supreme Court. Supreme Court can operate under the standards of unreasonableness and all this kinds of stuff. Why do you think that happened? Because they saw that the Spartan and the religious had a majority that was going in to be a bigger majority, not a smaller majority. And they said, well, we better find a way to stop this. Well, that's what they did. And that's what this whole fight is about the judicial review is the attempt to the counteroffensive.
Don't you think it's, I'll call it an artful balance between being a Jewish state and a democracy? That's important to me, not just being a
well, again, there's different kinds of democracies. They're saying very clearly a Western liberal democracy. That's what they want. I don't know if that's, well, I mean, there's elements of that are nice. There's other elements that I'm not so sure about. I mean, we call it a Jewish state. Canada is a country of all its citizens. It's not a country of Catholics. No. It's not a country of whatever else you have here. It's a country of everybody. So it's not a Christian state. It's a country of everybody. Israel, we say, is a Jewish state. Maybe if you want to be a liberal democracy, you kind of got to drop the Jewish part.
Well, you can have both. It's not a zero.
I don't know.
We don't have a second democracy here in Canada. It's not actually a country.
Okay.
So we
Well, it's not inevitable, but it's another aspect that Mayor's pointed out is that keep in mind.
For Protestants, and now it's predominantly right? So we just replace religion with a very, very virulent woke left agenda, and that's what permeates all levels of government. Listen, I wanted in my whole youth, I worked in politics, and I aspired to this idea of secularism, and I thought that's how we could all live under one big tent. But when we take out religious authority, we just have other ideologies move in, and that's what we have now, right?
Yeah. It's for the vacuum. It's for the vacuum.
I'd rather know where people stand. I'd rather know who's in my government and who's in the courts, because they own their religious background, and have people pretend that they're neutral and fair and objective, because those terms are relevant and don't actually exist.
The mayor pointed out that you also have the demographic issue of the birth rates in Israel, which are obviously much higher among the religious,
yes,
for obvious reasons, and among the Spartan.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the way things are. See, I mean, again, demography is a very
tricky case.
Yeah, it's not so simple, and over time and there's a lot of factors involved there. But if you follow the projections as they're going, then you see a large Jewish birth rate. You see a falling Arab birth rate. You see I'll give you an example of a wild card. There's a lot of wild cards. We have wild cards in life. They do happen. You can't predict them so easily, but they pop up. Afterwards, you say, oh yeah, right? So this is coming up very soon. America is planning to enter Israel into their visa waiver program, right? And it looks like that's going to happen. Okay, what that means right now, if you're an Israeli, you want to come to America, you cannot come. An Israeli cannot go on an airplane and go to America. You have to go and get an appointment at the embassy, which is not so easy to do. Then you have to get checked out, and you got to get approved, and it's a whole thing, right? And it costs money, and this, that, and the other, and so people do it, but it's a whole thing, right? If they enter the visa waiver program, then any Israeli, Arab and Jew, and everybody, right, will be able to just get on an airplane and come to America. Now, technically, they'll only be allowed to stay for a certain amount of time and not be allowed to work and all this kind of stuff. But we all know what goes on in America, and in the malls especially. And so, you know, there's no one coming around looking for you. You know, you can stay for as long as you want. Certainly if you marry an American, that's a way in, you know? So when this happens, what is going to happen? Oh man, I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. I mean, you got all these Israelis that go on these trips after the army to Thailand and to South America. Well, those aren't really places that you want to live. Those are places where you want to maybe relax and, you know, have fun, do some drugs, but that you don't want to stay there. There's no future there, right? But America, you know? And what about if I'm an Arab and I own a business in, you know, I don't know where, anywhere in America, right? And it's not so easy for me to get my family members over here to work for me. But if they can just all get on airplanes and show up, I might have a job for all of them. You know? So again, I mean, no one knows what's going to, it's a crazy world. You know, Germany has, you know, they're very good at racism. They're also very good at building things, at designing. They're the best at designing all the, you know, they do, you know, cars and all these kinds of things, right? They're very good at it, and they're all involved in it. But they don't have any workers. They're short 2 million workers. They're short 2 million workers in Germany. That means if you get a job offer in Germany,
You're there forever.
you get a visa. It doesn't matter if you can speak. It doesn't matter who you are. You got a job offer in Germany, in you go. They will let you in the country with any job offer. I mean, 2 million people. That's how much they're short right now.
We're short.
And everybody's short. So, and that's why everybody is lessening their requirements. I mean, America just opened their border. So, but all those guys are going to work. You know, none of those people coming across the border are like unemployed. They're all working. You know, there's plenty of jobs for them. So, ironically, you can walk across the border in Mexico, but you can't get on an airplane in Israel and fly here. But you will be able to soon.
So,
And that could have zero effect, or that could be the craziest thing we've ever seen. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Yes.
Switching gears, Birthright received a big funding package this year.
Yes.
And there's far fewer trips leaving that happen. And at least in my circles, I find a very clear demarcation line between people who have been to Israel in terms of their level of involvement and connection and interest in Israel and all this stuff, and Jews who have never been to Israel, they're younger, but they never actually experienced it, right? So the whole idea of taking young from Israel, I see a massive difference, right? Just sort of, you know, in my circles of those sort of things. So what's going on with the birthright funding pact? Is that a temporary thing? Is this like the new normal?
So I think that one of the biggest questions, it's a bit funny.
So
But one of the biggest questions in the Jewish world is what's with Miriam Adelson?
what's that?
What's with Miriam Adelson? I mean, like, it's not my place to tell the woman what to do. She can do whatever she wants. But I mean, this is the woman who's Israeli. Okay. She's a doctor. She's no dummy. Okay. She's a doctor. She's a woman who is very well aware of the world. She is not a trophy wife in any sense. You know, she is a person, a very strong person. And she's well aware of Israel and Jewish stuff and all that kind of stuff and birthright, right? And her husband passed away. And I think the standard feeling in the Jewish world was we're getting ready to get tons of money because she was always the one pushing him to give to Israel. He never gave to Israel before he married her. Next thing you know, he's all Mr. Israel, right? I mean, Sheldon Adelson, who lived in Las Vegas, is buried on the Mount of Olives. Well, what the hell? I mean, that's crazy. Why would Sheldon Adelson want to be buried on the Mount of Olives? Because that's what he wanted, you know? So, and she's credited with that. So, if that's the case, why did birthright funding get cut? Or more so, where's all the money for everybody else? I mean, I'm not saying it's a good idea for one person to fund the entire Jewish community, but it is interesting that one person could.
I mean, it's pretty nuts if you think about it. Some of the richest people you say, well, they're very wealthy. Well, not compared to her. Like, she's very wealthy.
Yeah.
And she's not getting any,
Or is it like, a movement away from it?
I don't know. She has not, I mean, again, she has the ability to say whatever the hell she wants. We'll all listen. And she has not said anything about why she did this. No one knows why she cut this. I mean, maybe somebody knows, but no one, it's not public knowledge. She didn't say, I don't like this about birthright, so I'm cutting the money. She didn't say, you stole money from me or something like that.
How much money are we talking about?
She cut it she cut $20 million, which is a substantial amount when it comes to birthright. And the prices also went up. Prices went up in general. So it's cut, the combination of her cutting funding and the price increase of the trips eliminated a large amount of people who are going to go on these trips. And basically what it does is it makes it so that the more you want to go on the trip, you'll probably still get to go. But if you're not so gung-ho about it, then you might miss it. You're probably going to miss it, which is exactly what her husband said is the reason he gave all that money, was he was worried about the people who weren't going to make it. So that's a fascinating question that I don't think anybody has answers to, at least not right now. It could be she's just doing her homework, I guess. I don't know. I mean, seems like she's pretty knowledgeable as far as things go, but she maybe is preparing something, or I don't know. Maybe she's.
Well, I spoke to someone within Birthright and also Israel said that their data showing them that the over 26 trip, the ones that were
Didn't work.
6 to 30, 30 to 38 was, had almost no impact.
Right.
So I can understand arguing for kind of like those people.
No, but they cut those out completely.
Yeah, let's see, even the 18 to 22, 23, 26, that.
I don't know what her, again, I don't know what her beef is, so to speak, with the situation, although she clearly must have something going on. I mean, she doesn't need the money. She's okay. But cutting her like 20 million is like me cutting, I don't know, a quarter. I'm not even sure. Like, it's a strange move. It is a very strange move because we get a lot of press. And she hasn't explained it, which is also strange. But
like I'm just reading, she cut from that's the problem. Right?
I think it's over time but it's weird. It's a weird situation. She cut it. That's the point, is that she cut it when everyone thought she maybe would expand it. And she also cut political giving also, by the way, which is also strange. And it's all very strange, and no one knows what's going on. But I would just say this to your other point about the impact. I did a podcast about this. I don't know if you saw it, but I'll send it to you. But that what you said is true to a point. And Canada is I think quite different than America, especially Toronto, where in the way that you have a lot of Jews in Canada and Toronto specifically who maybe aren't of the highest level of Jewish observance, but they're quite Jewish and Zionistic and Jewish in different ways, and are inclined to marry fellow Jews as well. You see a lot of that in Canada. A lot of people who are married, marrying fellow Jews, even though they're not Orthodox Jews. Okay, you see that in Canada. It's not considered crazy. We're in America, it's a little crazy. It's very different in America. America is very extreme. When it comes to birthright in America, there's definitely a major difference between someone who's been to Israel and someone who hasn't in terms of their Jewish experience. However, the intermarriage rate is such in America that it's so incredibly high in the non-Orthodox world that even though your experience is different, it's not clear how much of a practical implication there is of that once you intermarry and begin to assimilate into another culture, which inevitably is what happens in almost all intermarriages. There are exceptions, but they are rare. So what is interesting will be, as I said this in my podcast, is the Jews who go on birthright and marry other Jews who also went on birthright. How will that affect their children? That is going to be fascinating to see. How will their experience be different than their parents who did not have that experience? right? These people are much more knowledgeable of the Jewish history or whatever you want to call it than their parents were. So does that mean they're going to do better? Well, maybe, but it's also a different world that they live in, so maybe they're not. It's unclear. But I think in America, the problem is that birthright, despite all their fake studies, they claim to be like decimating intermarriage, and that is just not the case at all. And I'm not saying it's their fault. It's just not. I don't have a way to do that either, you know. But it's just not happening. And so, whereas somebody may have had a great experience on birthright and really truly love Israel and have that whole thing, it's unclear how practically that may carry over to another generation, or even to Jewish identity as things progress into the future. I mean, the numbers, at least in my experience, you know, their studies are totally fake. Okay, I'm not saying that to be a jerk. Like, their studies are totally fake. They ask people how they feel about being Jewish. They ask people how they feel about Israel. They ask people how they feel about this and how they feel about that. Nobody cares how anybody feels about anything. I want to know what you do. I don't care what you feel like. You know, do you go to Jewish events? Do you give money? Who are you married to? Who are you dating? Who are you? I want numbers here. Give me the answers to these questions. You know, I can be liberal and have a whole spectrum of possibilities here, but there gotta be, you know, I don't care how you feel. That's ridiculous. Like, that's not a study. That's just stupidity. You know, so they have all these stupid studies that are all fake. So, you know, how much of an impact? I have pictures on my wall of the birthright trips that I did. I'm not a scientist, or a mathematician of any kind, but I can look at the pictures and go, I know what this person's doing, I know what this person's doing, I can go through the pictures, and it's not great. Now, maybe I was the worst birthright leader in the history of birthright, and I just have bad results. It's possibility, but I'd say it's not likely that I was at least worse than others. So the results are not spectacular. In that one demographic where you have people who went on birthright and married people who went on birthright, oh, that's interesting. That could be interesting, because certainly they would want their kids to go on birthright theoretically, right? And they have all these shared experiences they want to share. And okay, that could be interesting.
Does that explain why support or sympathy for Israel is declining in the United States? Do you think?
Well, I think that it's just a matter. It's just, I mean, at the end of the day, again, I'm not a mathematician or anything like that, but numbers matter. You know, it's a good thing those people exist, and numbers matter very much. And you have a large segment of Muslims moving to America, and you have a Jewish community that is a complete. I mean, again, it's not something that happened overnight. It happened over time. But the non-observant Jewish community in America is literally disappearing as we speak. You know, and again, it didn't happen overnight. It's a combination of things that went on over, you know, time, over decades. But that's where we are. You know, when I was a kid, which was not that long ago, you know, conservative Judaism was a powerhouse in America. You know, it was a powerhouse. If you went to any major city, if you wanted to see the most, you know, strongest synagogue in the city, you went to the conservative one. You know, that's the one you went to. Yeah, and it's just gone. It's just gone. No, well, they're not doing so much better. They're not doing so much better. You know,
My shul was 200 yards from here.
what is it?
My shul is 200 yards from here. I might be the youngest member.
My father says that the average age of his synagogue is deceased. So it's like, you know, what can I tell you? It's a rough situation. And so as the numbers, there's a podcast, but it's in Hebrew, but a guy did a thing where he basically just showed that the Democratic Party just do the numbers. They have a lot of new Muslim members and not a lot of new Jewish members. So, and so it's just, I mean, in a democracy, you have to go according to the numbers. It's not how you feel. You know, so
So there's been a request, someone has to say cut a shoot. I wanted to thank Ben Packer personally I do it on camera or?
Yes.
Okay, and I want to thank Ben Packer personally. Ben Packer is, and I found a great title for him, he's a hero who doesn't wear a cape. So he's always talking about going to Hebron and going to this. So I took a trip with a fellow named Ezra Ridgely, might have heard of him, he made Aliyah. Took me in his car all over the place, like in the middle of the West Bank, and this is here and this is there. One place in the middle of nowhere, Arrowgood Farms. Unbelievable, just Google it. 2 people there, they're building a hotel. So don't ask me how they do it. Arrowgood, A-R, not Agarud, A-R-U-G-O-T, Farms. They're building a hotel. They have 2 people there, because they have a lot of visitors. So it's the middle of nowhere. I'm like, this is unbelievable. No one's there. No one's there. Who pulls up? Ben Packer. Ben Packer is showing someone around. Oh, there he is. He walks the walk and he talks the talk. So I hope that you can visit him there and see when he's on his playing field. If anyone wants to make a donation, you can get a receipt for it. I don't want to thank him. You know, maybe small in number, but we're strong in spirit. And it's going out to, what is it, hundreds of thousands of people out there? Whatever it is. Each one will tell another. And I want to thank them so much for coming here and sharing with us. And it's really been a pleasure. Thank you, Ben. No, I have to say, easy catch. Could you do a quick minute? Are you done? Can we just say a quick minute? It'll take 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
Okay, no problem. So let's get a vote, please. Thank you.
Okay, so whoever was watching this, please share it on the various platforms that you use. Thank you very much for joining us. Shalom, shalom.